Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which will be looking at wellbeing within and beyond the school gates. We'll be looking at how nutrition, sport, travel and the community are really important when looking at that subject. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before I introduce our lovely panelists who've agreed to join us today. All the links and the slides will be shared after our webinar by email to all of the attendees and anyone who's registered. We are looking forward to having some questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions during the presentations, please do put them into the chat and we'll be monitoring them. I would also say that we have run a number of these webinars over the course of the year, over the course of our Wellbeing Governors campaign. All of those webinars are available to watch back on our website, so please do visit them and view back any that you haven't already seen. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Unfortunately, today we were supposed to be joined by Bert Bond from University of Exeter, who had to pull out for unforeseen reasons. We're very fortunate that Alex White from the British Nutrition Foundation has stepped in at short notice. So thank you ever so much, Alex. And Alex will be our first panelist that we'll hear from. Alex is a nutrition scientist. His multiple qualifications in nutrition and food science and sports and exercise nutrition. The British Nutrition Foundation is a charity that provides information and resources and training on that topic. Their aim is that everyone can access healthy and sustainable diets. So we'll hear from Alex first and then go on to Chris. Chris Kenyon is the Group CEO of The Key, the organisation behind The Key, Governor Hub, Scholar Pack and Arbor just recently. They support 17,000 schools across the UK. Chris is also co-chair of governors at Hanover Primary School in North London and has had a long interest in active travel and how we can move around towns and cities. He's been involved in campaigns to create more space for walking and cycling. So he's going to join us today to talk about why and how children move around every day matters and to share some of the ideas from his own experience as a school governor on what can be implemented. Our final panelist is Katie Chapman. Katie is a full-time classroom teacher. She's been teaching for 16 years. She's the PE lead at Little Common School in Bexhill-on-Sea. Interesting setup at Bexhill in Little Common that you have 600 pupils, but only one playground, one school hall and one field to do all of your PE. So I can imagine that's a big challenge. Despite that, the school has been awarded Outstanding by Ofsted, has a gold rated award from the Healthy Schools rating scheme and is also the Active Primary School of the Year from Active Sussex. So really good practice going on that we can all hear about. So I'm going to hand over to Alex to start us off, please. So over to you, Alex.
Oh, great. Thank you, Hannah. And thank you, everyone, for joining this afternoon. So my name is Alex White, and I'm a nutrition scientist at the British Nutrition Foundation. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about healthy eating in schools, some of the things that you guys can do as governors, and some things that are more sort of in the classroom and moving forward. So next slide, please. So just quickly, who are the British Nutrition Foundation, the company I work for, and then Food Effective Life, our education programme. I'm sure most of you will not have heard of us. That's okay, gold star for those who have. But we're a nutrition charity that provides impartial, evidence-based information, resources and training on food and nutrition. So we've got a website for the nutrition.org.uk, but then we also run Food Effective Life, which is kind of the education arm of the work we do. So this includes things like teacher training opportunities, lots and lots of resources for in the classroom, but also things for like a whole school approach to food education, which I'll be talking a little bit about as I go through, which hopefully will be the things that are most useful to you guys. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to be talking about why correct nutrition is so important, kind of the interactions between diet and physical activity and other positive behaviours in school and how we can promote these, kind of looking at what we're eating at the moment, what are the current diets, why are these poor, and how can we make improvements in these. And then finally, I'll talk you through some of the resources that we've got, which hopefully you guys will find useful. Next slide, please. Feels weird saying that at the end of every slide. I feel very important. So first of all, why is good nutrition important? Well, first of all, and I think kind of simply, poor diets are linked with an increased risk in some diseases, not necessarily in childhood, but what we see if you just click one more on, that diet tracks into adulthood. So for one, obese children are more likely to become obese adults, but also poor nutrition, poor healthy eating habits in childhood do track into adulthood, which is really important when we're trying to ensure that children get the right skills and the right knowledge to make healthier choices through the rest of their life. So in terms of why it's important for children and young people, there's the emotional behavioural side of this, stigmatisation, bullying, low self-esteem, and then the associated school absences. There's also the health implications, things like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, pre-diabetes, bone and joint health. And then there's again, this tracking between childhood and adulthood. There's also the links that we see directly in childhood. So I've just pulled out one example. There's a lot that we could pull out, but one of the really important ones for children is having too much sugar, which can have an impact on dental health. Next slide, please. So it might be worth just clicking through these ones because there's a few on here. So in terms of what we're eating at the moment, we know that we're having an excess consumption of free sugars. We can just think of these as sugars for the purpose of this presentation. Salt, saturated fat, and energy or calories, we know that as. The implications of this, particularly in terms of energy and calories, are that a significant proportion of children are overweight or obese. We know from the National Childhood Measurement Programme that 1 in 5 children start school, this is primary school, overweight or obese, and by the time they leave primary school, this increases to 1 in 3. And we'll look at kind of some of the health inequalities with this slightly later on. What we also know is that few people are meeting the 5-a-day recommendations, particularly in teenagers. It's only 8% of adolescents meet the 5-a-day recommendations. We know there's a low intake of fibre and whole grains. This is across the board, and the same with low intakes of some vitamins and minerals, particularly in some groups. It's interesting to note that actually these groups tend to be in that adolescent age range. So from the National Diet and Nutrition Survey, we know it's sort of these 11 to 18-year-olds that have some of the lowest intakes of vitamins and minerals. So really important to kind of look at that. Next slide, please. So what are the recommendations? What should we be teaching in school? Well, we should be looking at the Eat Well guide, which shows us the proportions of different foods that we should be eating in our diet. If we kind of just break this down, in terms of the fruit and vegetables group, I think most people know that this is 5-a-day recommendations, but it's also important to make sure that we choose a variety of foods in these. So when we're teaching these to kids, and it might be nice if you're thinking of a display or something in school all about eating the rainbow, and children have the opportunity to kind of draw the different foods that they're eating or that they could be eating onto the rainbow. Nice idea for kind of a display or something like that. In terms of the potatoes, bread, rice, pasta, and other starchy carbohydrates, that big yellow group, the recommendations here are really to go for whole grain options. And that's linked to what we said in the previous slide about fibre intake, the fact that fibre intake is so low across the board. The little pink group there is to have some foods that are beans, pulses, fish, eggs, meat, and other proteins. The recommendations here are really to have 2 portions of fish a week, one of which should be oily fish. Now, the importance of oily fish is to do with the long chain omega-3 fatty acids, which you might have heard of before, and the links that they have with heart health. So trying to encourage people to have those. Also in this group, trying to make sure we make sustainable choices. And one option, if you're not going for meat or fish, is to increase the amount of beans, lentils, and other plant-based proteins in that group. The little blue group is the dairy and alternatives. Again, trying to choose lower fat and lower sugar options here. Another note that I think is quite important when we're seeing kind of a little bit of an increase in the amount of people who are vegetarian or particularly vegan for this group is that if you are choosing dairy alternatives, to try and get them that are calcium fortified. Most are now, but also iodine fortified where possible, and you can find out this information on the label. The really small kind of slither of a group is oil and spreads. Recommendations here are to use unsaturated oils and spreads rather than saturated ones. These kind of treat foods, these are actually slightly outside of the Eat Well guide. You'll see them in the bottom left. Trying to keep these to small portions, have them less often. And this is because of what we talked about, that people are having too much salt, too much saturated fat and too much sugar. So trying to reduce those in the diet, bit of an obvious one. And then drink at least 6 to 8 cups or glasses of fluid a day, remembering that water is a great choice One of the big ones here, and you guys will probably know this from school, is energy drinks and sugar sweetened beverages. These can actually have a big impact, particularly on that kind of adolescent age group. That's one of the reasons why there's been government policy, things like the soft drinks industry levy that's occurred there to try and reduce the amount of sugar, particularly in teenagers, that's coming from that. Next slide, please. There's also recommendations around physical activity, lots of different ways that this can be beneficial. One that's talked about a lot is kind of the balance of energy in, energy out to maintain a healthy weight, but it goes far beyond this, as I'm sure many of you will know. Health implications, benefits to health, also things like sleep, stress, lifting, mood, often forgotten about, but really important, and also the range of social benefits, great opportunity to make friends, great opportunity to learn important life skills, things like teamwork, but also just great to encourage that at a young age. Similarly to in terms of healthy eating, physical activity can track into adulthood. If you've got a sport or an activity that you really love when you're younger, this can track into adulthood. So the recommendations for children and young people are to be active for at least 60 minutes every day and to engage in a variety of types and intensities of physical activity across the week. Next slide, please. So this is kind of where we are in terms of physical activity. Worryingly, I guess you could say, a smaller proportion are active every day than are considered less active. And if you just click one more on, there's also this implication of health inequalities in terms of physical activity. So in the least affluent areas, what we're seeing is an even larger reduction in those who are active every day and a larger proportion who are less active. We'll talk about the number of reasons for that in a second. Next slide, please. So this is, again, looking at kind of the health inequalities, trying to think, well, why are diets this poor? This is one of the really key reasons. I think what we're seeing is this is even more accentuated with everything that's happened with COVID and school closures, with education, but also with health. And what this graph kind of shows is that over a quarter of children in the 3 most deprived sort of tenths are obese, and this is much lower in the least deprived areas. So we see that health inequality there, over double in the most deprived areas to the least deprived or obese. Next slide, please. And the reasons for this is a number. I don't have time to talk about all of them. It's probably a presentation itself. But one of them is the fact that people on lower incomes will spend a higher proportion of their disposable income on food, which I think is kind of an obvious thing to say. I think the important thing here is that less healthy foods do tend to be cheaper. There's also things to do with the environment, and Chris will talk about kind of the walkability later, which I'm really looking forward to, on like the active travel and things like that, which are really, really important to tackling these kind of things. But also it's to do with kind of the infrastructure in different neighborhoods, exposure to fast food outlets, fewer opportunities to be active, and fitting into that fewer opportunities for active travel, which is, as I said, a really important thing to draw on. Next slide, please. So what can schools do? This might be one to just click forward again, if that's all right. Thank you. Trying to give children the best opportunities with high quality food education. If children have the knowledge and the skills to make healthier choices, then hopefully we can see that progression of healthy behaviours from childhood into adulthood. Ensuring the food and drink provided at school is healthy, and for teachers to, and staff within the school to be positive role models. Increasing opportunities for physical activity, and trying to balance these health inequalities, which is kind of linked to these other 3. There's lots of opportunities for this to improve knowledge, improve skills, to make people healthier, and school is a really great way to kind of tackle this. Next slide, please. So what can we do to help? Well, I'll talk quite quickly through this because I'm running out of time slightly. But we have the Food Effective Life website that provides lots of resources for children from 3 to 16 years. Everything's curriculum compliant and looks at the kind of key areas in the nutrition and food curriculum. Lots of recipes as well, over 300 recipes. And what these are is these give information on complexity rating. So how complex these recipes, how much time will they take, can I do them within the lesson, things like that. And there's also the whole school area, which if you go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about. So this might be the area that's probably most useful for you guys. lots of opportunities to encourage a whole school food approach. Lots of information on how to do this in this area. So food policies, food provision, breakfast clubs, healthy lunch boxes, lots of information to send to parents. If you're sending them a link, it kind of tackles all of these key areas. Information for those who are producing school education resources about food. If you guys haven't heard of the British Nutrition Foundation Health Eating Week, you are missing out. It's just happened, and there's all the resources will stay online after the week. So things like posters, lots of activities for people to do as a whole school together. Information about careers in food, showing pupils that it's not just when we eat food, there's also careers in food, and things about Growing Club resource. We just had a webinar by two fantastic teachers who are talking about how they've used Growing Clubs to promote food and promote health within their schools. Next slide, please. So a little bit about kind of the parental engagement resources. Again, a great opportunity to send these links to parents to try and encourage them. Might make them make healthier choices, but hopefully this will track to their children as well. Next slide, please. And then just finally, a bit of information about, I know in the news there's been a lot about kids still having to isolate and things like that. So if they are remote learning, we've produced a remote learning hub with lots of different activities and resources about food and nutrition. Over 560 activities and lots of opportunities to send these to parents to use at home. Next slide, please. And then finally, the Food Effective Life YouTube channel. Lots of information on remote learning videos. If people are interested in the webinars that we've run, very wide ranging, you can get those on there. BNF Health Eating Week cooking sessions, and lots of resources for pupils and teachers as well. So yeah, hopefully some opportunities for you guys to send links or to use yourself and learn a little bit more about Food Effective Life. And that's everything from me. So yeah, thank you very much for having me on, and I'll be around to take questions after everyone else has presented. So thank you very much.
Thanks ever so much, Alex. Definitely some links that I'll be sharing with the school where I'm a governor. Lots of really useful information and some quite scary information around that data around disadvantage, I guess. So I'm now going to hand over to Chris. Hopefully we can get his slides up. And yep, and Chris is going to be talking about active travel for children in schools. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and what a great presentation from Alex. I work in schools nationally, but I wanted to talk about my experience as a governor and also as a parent. And I wanted to start with a question. And I've got quite a few slides. Yeah, next slide, please. We'll bring this up and we'll get really smooth. So children want to walk, scoot and cycle to school. And I have a question for you all out there, which is, are we enabling it? And I use the word enabling rather than the word encouraging, because actually children don't really need encouraging to walk, scoot or cycle to school. If you ask your average primary school class if they'd like to travel to school actively, lots of hands go up and children are excited. The question is, what are we doing as governors and as schools to enable it rather than just encourage it? And on that point, I sort of have a question, and I know that a lot of the people, for folks who are dialed in, you're all in different settings across the UK. But a question that's worth asking is, if a family moved in next door to you right now and they had an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, would you feel comfortable recommending to the 8-year-old that they walk to your school on their own independently? And my second question would be, would you be comfortable recommending to the 12-year-old that they cycle to school on their own? And we don't have a poll on here, but I'm going to guess the answer from most people is no. And before I go on to the next slide, I want to ask you a question, which is, why not? Why are you not? We know this is important. We know that it's really important for children to be able to have independence and to move, but why would you not be willing? So on that, we'll go to my next slide. As I said, I think children really want to go to school actively, and they don't need very much encouragement, but they do need enabling. And we know that this active travel is really important. So for clarity, active travel is walking, scooting, or being on a bike. And we know it's important for a host of reasons. It's important for health, for the physical health of a child. It's important for mental health, and I'm struck. One of the lessons I think from COVID has been, in addition to the NHS being a hero and school leaders and school teachers being heroes in this time, actually walking for me has been a hero. I know of many families I meet, and they'll just say, "Oh, we just realised we had to get out and take a daily walk during lockdown," and it really struck a chord. People made the link between physical activity and mental health. It's important for children's independence. And so the ability to make journeys, to travel independently around cities, towns, villages, makes a huge difference to a child's sense of well-being, their ability to meet children, and the idea that networking with your mates is not something you do on the PlayStation. It's something you do down it could be at centre of town looking around shops, and it could be on a playing field. It doesn't matter. You've got out and you've moved independently with your peers. It's also an important matter from a social justice angle. Like to Alex's point, we know that the issues around obesity and around inactivity, which are linked but not the same, that there is a really strong social justice angle to which communities are not getting enough daily movement. And then, of course, it matters for the environment. We spend all our time telling children that there is a climate crisis and what can we do to change, and yet how we move is responsible for about 25% of emissions in the UK. So a few of you would have said no to I don't feel comfortable recommending to an 8-year-old that they go to school on their own, and I'm going to posit that for most of you the answer would have been traffic. I can't mind read, but I'm going to guess that traffic is an issue. And here's a picture outside a typical primary school. On the keep clear markings of a car marked there. And if we go to our next slide, even for children when they are walking, traffic makes it unpleasant, makes it something they're less likely to do. And we've got this issue, 8 in 10 of children do not get their 1 hour of physical exercise a day. 4 in 10 children are already overweight or obese entering secondary school. And much as nutrition is really important, and Alex is talking about that, and we're going to talk about physical in-school activity, I want to get everyone thinking about the importance of accidental exercise. Everyday exercise, the movement that is built into your everyday routine. It requires no big commitment. It doesn't require getting into special clothes. It's just the physical movement you do in your everyday routine, to the shops, to the school, to the mosque, or to the church. It doesn't matter. It's that everyday routine. Next slide, please. So I'm also going to say that for most schools, the school run is part of the problem. In London, where we have amazing public transport and relatively high density of schools, 1 in 4 cars in London in the morning rush hour is on the school run. We have 2,000 schools across the UK with illegal levels of pollution. And if this is an interesting teacher tap piece of data about teachers impacted in terms of a collision with a vehicle in or around a school car park. I wanted to before I go into some solutions, I wanted to share some thoughts based on history and also based on travel in other parts of the world. Again, next slide, please. So this is an extreme. This is a school, this is an elementary school, 600 children in Virginia. Most children are traveling from less than 5 miles, but that is the morning drop-off. And you can see there's a video link here, which for those of you who get the slides afterwards, that snake of cars snakes through, and then 5 cars at a time offload a child. And it's a 2-hour process to get children in and out of this school in a morning. And that's obviously an extreme. But I would guess that if any of you took the time just to stand outside your school one morning this week and watched, you might see a lot of cars, depending on who you are, or even just a handful. But what you will see is anxious adults watching children move around large metal objects. It's not child-centered calm. For many head teachers, it's car chaos. It's a moment of very high anxiety during the day. So that's one extreme in the school drop-off. And if we go to the next slide, here's another extreme. And this is literally only 200 miles from where I am right now. This is Assen in the Netherlands. And that is a secondary school bicycle park. And those are secondary schools. That school actually forbids children who live from within a mile of the school from cycling because they don't have room on the school premises for enough bike parking. But there you've got over 50% of children cycling every day to school, getting their active travel on their daily journey. So we can go two ways as a country, and the problem is I think we're sleepwalking one way at the moment. And if we go to the next slide, I sort of put this in historical context for the UK. We often talk about having a really great safety track record, road safety record in the UK. But in reality, what's happened is we've banned vulnerable users from the road. We've had government messages about 20 years ago that said, told children, one false move and you're dead. It's on you, the child, to change how you move. We do have fewer children hit by cars than we did 20 years ago. But it's because children have been banned from moving. It's not because we've changed how we move around schools. And in fact, the last 2 years, child KSIs, that's killed and seriously injured, have gone up in the last 4 years, since 2016. So we have a problem. And this impacts children's sense of independence. We can go to the next slide. Maya Hillman, who's this researcher who wrote this report about one false move, tracked Sheffield, took a family in Sheffield, the Thomas family, and tracked over 4 generations, so this is going back to 1920, how far each member of the family was able to move or was allowed to move when they were 8 years old. And what you see is marked on this map, the large white area is where the great-grandfather in 1920, the area that he was allowed to move, also 1919, you can see allowed to walk up to 6 miles to go fishing with friends just south of Rotherham. And you can see the grandfather is allowed to move about a mile. And you can see that by the time we get to the great-grandson, this is only 4 or 5 years ago, actually this 8-year-old is told you may not cross a road. So you must stay on the block. And unless you're with an adult, you can't cross a road on your own. And I think that's tragic, it has a huge impact on child independence. So this also impacts what goes on in schools. If we go to the next slide. So we've got large bodies of evidence now that actively traveling to school, of course it impacts fitness levels, but it's also associated with better academic outcomes. Children who've got rid of some of their energy on the walk to school or the scoot to school have better behaviour in classroom. They're able to actually sit down and focus. If we go to the next slide. In fact, go another slide forward. So is there a better outcome possible? And I want to introduce an idea that started in the Netherlands only 12 years ago, but is now taking off nationally and is I was talking to a head teacher in Levenshume in Greater Manchester last week, being rolled out in Edinburgh, in London and Birmingham. And there is a piece of legislation that changes at the end of this year, which means that school streets really will be able to be rolled out anywhere nationally. So this is a picture of my school, taking about 8:40 in the morning. And what you'll see is even though we're in central London with cars, that actually we've banned cars from directly outside the school for about an hour. Well, it's half an hour outside either side of drop-off, and that applies in the morning and in the afternoon. And of course, this won't apply to every school in the country. Some of you have schools that are on main roads, or you're in settings where it just doesn't make sense. But for many schools, this is an option. And if we can go a slide forward and just explain a little bit about how this works. So our council have put up a sign and a camera, and it basically says this is a pedestrian and a cycle zone. And that gets enforced for the time periods you can see on the screen. And if I go another slide forward. You know, and I actually popped by the school this morning and just took this photo just to make sure it was still working. And what you see here is children playing football in the street. You see some girls on their scooters, there's some children on their bikes in the background. That street, less than 2 years ago, had dozens of cars dropping children off, and we were as nervous as any other head teacher or set of governors in the country. And with this very small change, it took a few weeks to bed in, we've seen not just a change in what happens on the street outside the school, but we've seen a massive change in, you know, a few parents still drive and drop off a few hundred meters away from the school, and that's okay. What's important is that for children as they arrive at school, there is a child-centered calm. There it's nudged parents who were driving to just saying, actually, do you know what, that extra hassle of walking the last 200 meters isn't worth taking the car for. I'll walk and cycle. We've seen a huge uptake in independent travel. So obviously the parents who want to walk then and cycle their children to school, that's great, but we've seen an increase in children who are willing to go to school on their own, an increase in scooting, and an increase in bike riding. So hugely impactful. So some thoughts about how, what you can do as a governor on this. And if I can go to my next slide, that would be actually another slide forward would be great. So a few things you can, I think, do as a governor. Ultimately, we're not responsible for the operational running of the school. This is something that the head teacher and other board, the whole board of governors need to be supportive of. But some things you might want to ask about as a governor. It's all schools really should have an active travel plan, and there is the STARS scheme in London, or it's called Modal Shift STARS for the rest of the country, and those are resources for schools to do simple surveys in class, ask children how they're travelling in, starting to build up a data set for working out how much active travel is going on in the school and what the barriers to active travel are. I'd strongly encourage you just to invite a local councillor or a cabinet member of your council just to come and join you at school drop-off, and just to see what the impact of that drop-off is on children. I don't know if everyone here is aware of play streets, but play streets, again, are something that most councils across the UK will support, and it's the idea that you close a street just as a one-off event and just let children play in it. One of the amazing things is when you create space for children to play, you don't actually have to organise lots of activities. Children just get on and play naturally. Survey parents is something that the school might want to consider. Something to discuss with your head teacher. Head teachers have many priorities right now, and I'm always concerned about overloading them with more. But certainly the head teachers, many head teachers I've worked with have sort of secretly been concerned or anxious about this for a long time, but they need the support of governors, and they need, because this is sometimes an awkward issue to raise with some parents. The choice of some parents to drive directly outside the school is what is stopping the majority of parents from encouraging children to walk or cycle. So knowing that they've got some support from governors makes a huge difference. I also think it's something where councillors, if they know that head teachers and governors are supportive, are willing to be much braver than they might be if they think they're just doing it on their own. And as I said, the law is changing in the UK. This is something that is now, councils will be able to enforce school streets nationally from December. So just a last couple of slides to run through, and I'll wrap up. If we can go forward. These are just some, in our area, we've done a larger intervention. So there's been something called a low traffic neighbourhood introduced, and that's the same street 2 years ago at night at 8:30, and the same street like 3 or 4 months ago. So we've gone from streets that are dominated by traffic to streets where you see families, and there's a mother walking down the street while her children are on a bike. If we can go forward again. Sorry, if we go back 2 slides, there's a couple of photos I just wanted to pick out that were fun. This is, again, more parents out with children skateboarding, roller skating in the street. Again, that boy skateboarding is on the street you saw blocked by traffic just on the previous slide. That's a secondary school, again, that's in the area that's seen a huge increase in active travel. And then if we go forward to the 2 slides, that would be great. And then just a final note. On the left, you'll see Jessica. She's 12 years old. I got a call from Jessica. She's my daughter, for clarity. I got a call from her. She was seeing some friends about a month ago, and she just cycled home. And that's a 2-mile journey that she's done in London through low traffic neighbourhoods. And I, as a parent, am fine with that. We've made such dramatic changes with the council to the traffic in the area that we live in, that journey is fine for a child to do on their own. And then that picture on the right is taken in February. It's 4 degrees, and I just spotted a parent cycling what must be a 4.5-year-old down the street in the midwinter, and I think that's a real sign that we can make a difference on streets. I'll end with just a couple of resources. If we can go forward. There's some further reading in terms of educational papers or academic papers for people who are interested in this area. And if you're interested as a governor, just in some practical tools, there's a set of links in there from the Key for head teachers, Living Streets, Sustrans, some work put out by the National Education Union. And then there's a video that's well worth clicking on if you're interested in how school streets can work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Lots to think about there and take away, I'm sure, and hopefully people having conversations with their head teachers around next steps. We're going to hand over now to Katie. So hopefully we can get your slides up, Katie.
Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, over to you, Katie.
Thank you. Well, wonderful presentations there from Chris and Alex, and I think what they've said is really sort of informative, and I think schools can really take some of those points forward. What I'm going to talk to you today is how we have developed an active and lifestyle approach at Little Common School for all, not just for our pupils, but for families and the community as well. Next slide. Thank you. So as Hannah mentioned at the beginning, we've been really successful in terms of PE and sports at Little Common. We are an outstanding provider. We are a healthy school. We've just achieved our Healthy Schools Award, and that's really great because it doesn't just look at physical activity, it looks at what we provide in terms of healthy eating, nutrition and well-being for our pupils and our families as well. Next slide, please. So how do we create a healthy and active lifestyle culture at Little Common? And it's really embedded in everything that we do, in our whole curriculum and our whole approach in terms of what we do for our pupils and our family. And today I'm just going to talk about sports, active travel, nutrition and community, and how that comes together to create that approach. Next slide, please. So first of all, I think it's really important to establish who it is that you're targeting and what it is that you want them to be able to do. So for us, for a whole school community, that is our staff within our school. That's our teachers that are teaching PE. That's our teaching about nutrition. That's also the staff within the school. So our kitchen team, our office team. And if we want to engage pupils and to encourage and support within that, then everybody needs to have that active approach. They need to have that positive attitude towards a healthy lifestyle. It's also our staff CPD as well, what we are providing for our staff within school and the education that they have to impart to children. Our parents and the outside community, we have to think about what we're putting in place to engage and encourage them, as well as looking at what we're doing for our pupils. Next slide, please. So as well as identifying who those groups are, we need to think about actually what actions and what things are we doing across the day in order to achieve that, in order to be successful in creating that active school community. So that includes looking at play and lunch times and what opportunities we're providing for pupils and for staff as well, in terms of challenges and keeping them active, but also things such as snacks and that nutrition side of it as well, in terms of play times and lunch times, ensuring that our children have enough nutrition to obviously keep them active and keep them going as well. Things that we're putting in place before and after school, so that's our extracurricular provision, as well as our active travel initiatives. A bit like Chris was saying, that's a really good link there where that links together. Questionnaires, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Our PE curriculum, that's central to what we do here. So our PE curriculum in terms of what we're providing in terms of lessons, sports leaders, raising the profile of PE enables us to raise the profile of what we provide for children outside of school. And then that links to our parents within the community. So children are engaged and we're raising the profile of PE for all. That then means that we can engage and start to provide those things for parents and children outside of school as well. That then also links to the competitions and things that we put in place to raise the profile and make children want to take part and to raise their self-esteem and feel really great about the activity that they do. Next slide, please. So sport, this is where we start. You'll start to see, you can see some images here. So sport is not just PE and the curriculum. It's more than that. It's the clubs that we provide for children. It's the opportunities. It's the competition. It's the links with outside communities as well that we provide for our children. If you go to the next slide, please, I'll explain a little bit more about that. So we start with our PE curriculum, ensuring that the PE curriculum that we deliver is delivered effectively. And I think for schools as well, it's thinking about who delivers that curriculum. Is it sports coaches that come into your school, or is it your staff? We know that all our staff here are trained to deliver effective PE lessons, and they are role models to the children. And that's really important, that the staff that teach the PE are engaging and being really good role models as well. We also have to look at the extracurricular clubs that we provide, and we want to ensure that all our children have 60 minutes of activity every day. We know that that's the guidelines, that's for in school and outside of school as well, and we want to contribute towards that and ensure that children are active for 60 minutes a day in line with those guidelines. That also sits in line with our sports premium report as well, where we're achieving those key indicators. And when we start to look at the clubs that we provide for children, we want to know actually what clubs do children want to do. So, and I think the pupil voice there is key in us helping children to engage in physical activity. The pupil voice in understanding what the children want, what they like, what they don't like, and what will engage them in being active. At Little Common, we track all 600 pupils. I have a comprehensive tracking system where I look at who's active within school that we provide clubs for, and who's active beyond school. So you could have Tommy, for example, who doesn't attend any after school clubs that we provide at school, but he attends club 5 times a week where he goes to football and gymnastics or something outside of clubs. So knowing that information is important for me as a PE lead, but also for our staff to know who is really inactive. And that gives us valuable data and things that we can put in place within school. We also look at competitions as well, and I would put a question to schools as well to say, who is the competition for? Who are you engaging with that? We have a competitions for all approach here. Everybody takes part in competitions, and that's really important in raising children's self-esteem and their confidence for them to be able to want to be active and to think, actually, I'm really good at sport, or I'm really good at that, and finding something that they really like as well. And having links with sports coaches, who's coming into your school? So if it's a sports coach coming in, what are they doing? Are they providing any additional clubs that they can encourage children to come along to? Or are you having links with an outside agency that comes in to give them extra opportunities? And again, that links to your school sports premium report, where you're providing an enrichment of activity for children. Next slide, please. Community, we're really, you can't quite see the bottom of that there. It said helps keep us active. So we're really proud of what we do to engage our school community. We know that it raises the profile of PE and sport for our school, but it also raises the self-esteem and confidence of our children and their families. Next slide, please. So we do get active challenges. We do active challenges that go across the term, as well as daily challenges as well. We also provide healthy recipes and links to health websites such as the NHS Change for Life websites and things like that, where parents can access recipes and support materials. We do community strolls where we get everybody together. A little bit difficult at the moment, obviously in a pandemic, but we're looking to obviously roll that out going forward. Cooking workshops for our families, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of the nutrition that we provide. Fitness classes, links to local providers that we can provide for our families to access as well. So we're raising the profile, we're sharing resources, and we're saying, let's be active, everybody can do this together. These are the things that we can put in place to support you, and these are the things that you can do to get active and feel good about that. Next slide, please. So here, when we provide activities and when we provide things for our children and community, we have to think about what have we provided, but what is the impact of that? And that links to our school sports premium report, but it also links to knowing that what we've provided is having impact, and is that sustainable in the long term? So that's really key in terms of helping us to be successful, knowing that what we've put in place is having impact within our school. If you look at the statistics at the bottom there, we knew last year from the tracking of our pupils that 93% of our school were active. Active is a club outside of the school day up until March, and within the lockdown and children coming into school, that went up to 98%. So that's really important that we know the data and then being able to target children that haven't been active and looking at what we can do to get those children active as well. Next slide, please. Again, looking at activity during school closures, and I think sometimes we can forget about that because we're so busy in all the busyness of the pandemic that we forget to focus on actually what's happening with children. And Alex was talking about it at the beginning about inactivity of children, and we know that children have been more inactive during this pandemic. So we have to think as a school, what are we putting in place to ensure that we are encouraging and inspiring children to get moving, but not just children, but their families, because when children are at home, it's the family, the family life that helps them and encourages them to be active, to say, let's go out for a walk. Children not necessarily are going to do that by themselves unless they have a family that are also wanting to be active as well. So we looked at that data a lot, and we looked at how effective that was and what we can do to sustain that going forward. Next slide, please. Active travel. I know Chris has talked a lot about active travel, and it's a really interesting one. We're always continuing to develop what we do in terms of active travel around our school. We have a very, very busy road that goes around our school, and we've worked with the local council to reduce traffic and close off roads around the school time. A bit like Chris was suggesting, we've invited our MP in at the end of the day and the beginning of the school day to look at the impact of that as well. We have walking Wednesdays, and we dress up, we have spotty socks, they cycle to school, and it's just about encouraging but also enabling children to come to school and think, actually, why do they want to active travel? What's the benefits of that for them? Next slide, please. So we have walking Wednesdays because that's a nice little initiative for the children to sort of follow, and they like walking Wednesdays because it sounds really fun. We have parent questionnaires, and parent voice is key in terms of understanding why they want to active travel, why they don't, what could we do to make that easy and facilitate that for them. And pupil voice as well is also very key within that. Bike and scooter storage. If they active travel, where are they going to put their things that they bring to school? Is it safe? Do the children feel that their bikes and things are going to be kept safe within that area? Again, linking that to the active 60 minutes as well, and showing children that together, active travel, when you're walking for 20 minutes a day, that's part of your active 60 minutes every day as well. And also looking at national initiatives as well, such as the Big Pedal, Walk to School Week, taking part, all raising the profile. And we know that children, when they active travel, they come to school and they're more ready for learning as well. And that's important, isn't it, in the classroom, that children are ready for learning. Next slide, please. Nutrition. So nutrition is very much embedded into our school, and we believe that nutrition is a really key part in sort of teaching children about how to lead an active and healthy lifestyle. And we think that by helping children to grow their own vegetables, by showing them and providing them with the knowledge and skills to be able to cook, that's going to help them in the long term to think about making healthier lifestyle choices. And we invite parents in for workshops, so they work alongside the children. And we do healthy eating competitions, healthy eating posters. Our children help our kitchen team design a menu as well, and our school dinners and things like that in terms of what we have in school. Next slide, please. So DT and science curriculum, that's very much embedded within our whole school. So we do cooking lessons for all year groups, and that goes across the year. And our science curriculum teaches our children about correct nutrition, following the Eat Well guide, and those important in those important parts of information that children need to know about following a healthy, balanced lifestyle. We have newsletters with recipes and advice such as healthy lunch boxes and healthy breakfasts and alternatives and swaps and things that our parents can provide for our children. And we know that sometimes parents aren't confident and they're not sure about what to put in or what to provide. So we think workshops for our parents are a really valuable way in showing them some things that they can do as well to support their children, but also to support their family. And we know nutrition actually starts within the family as well. So what the children eat at home is a key part of what they understand about nutrition as well. We have a school charter where we grow vegetables, and children can then use that within their cooking as well. And of course, we have healthy school status as well, which is really important for us, that we've been recognised for what we provide for children and their families as well. Next slide, please. So all of that comes together to create a healthy and active lifestyle culture, and it's more than just one thing. It's all of those things embedded within your school, from your staff to your pupils to your community, and being able to really sort of promote that and engage them all. And the benefits of that are really key in that the confidence of parents and children, the confidence of staff to deliver those lessons, raise self-esteem, raise confidence, and that's what we're aiming for. All our pupils to leave Little Common with a love of sport and knowing something that they like, to be able to sustain that as they move through life, to be able to choose healthy and healthy lifestyle options. Next slide, please. So what role do governors play in improving physical activity? And I always think that the PE curriculum is at the heart of that, and understanding who teaches it, what do they teach, and what do they deliver, and how is that embedded within the school, and how is that progressed and moved forward, and what does that look like in your school? Also looking at what the school improvement plan is, how is physical activity and health linked on that, and that also links to your sports premium funding as well, and you being able to ask those questions. How is that money being spent, and actually how is that money being spent to engage children and their families, and to ensure that actually it's more than just the children within school, it's that whole healthy and active lifestyle approach. And that's just a little bit about what we do here at Little Common, and I hope a little bit has been helpful for you. And of course, all schools are different in terms of what they do and what they deliver, but we find that what we do here has been successful so far, but we're always looking to improve too. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Katie. That is really inspirational to know what schools are doing out there. Really wonderful to see. We do have some questions coming into the chat, so if we just move straight on to some questions. I've got one straight up for Alex. Great presentation from Abby, but is asking about how schools can balance promoting the importance of healthy eating whilst also being mindful about not encouraging obsessive behaviours regarding food, which could potentially lead to eating disorders, particularly in girls.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic question, and something that really needs to be mindful of. One of the things that I always think when we talk about nutrition, particularly in schools, is to talk about the positive, talk about including more of things like fruit and vegetables, more whole grains, rather than less. I think media and social media potentially are a big cause of the fact that it's always less, have less salt, have less sugar, have less saturated fat. So I think trying to promote the positive eating behavior, healthy swaps, the little things, rather than saying this is the diet you should be having, push towards that. And if you're not meeting that and you've kind of failed in some way or whatever it might be, I think it's all about promoting the positive and looking at the small swaps and recognizing that they're going to make a big difference.
Excellent, thank you, really useful. Second question is from Andrew for Chris. Have you not just moved the traffic issue to nearby streets? So I guess this is just particularly about the school where you are a governor. And he'd also be interested to know from Chris how many parents have stopped driving their children to school. Do you have a percentage or a number of how many? So first of all, has the problem just been sort of shifted elsewhere, I guess?
So two answers. We have a definite decrease, a very significant decrease for our school of parents driving. So it's not entirely rate. We've got a couple of parents who are coming long distances, but I would say a 70 to 80% drop. Now, car drop-off wasn't particularly high. I would say about 10, 15% of parents were driving in. And so that's dropped down from that to about 2%. That has made all the difference for other people's journeys though. So it is a significant drop-off. And I'd also say, I don't think just where there are parents who are dropping off 100 meters from the school, that's okay. The point is that at the point where a child is entering the school, that point where it's just chaos in the morning, lots and lots of people moving, is the place where you want it not, you don't want those cars is right outside the school, and pushing them to a boundary area that's 100 meters either side of the school is a much safer way of it happening. So the simple answer is we have decreased parents driving by about 80%. And then secondly, even where parents remain driving, it's better that they are not directly outside the school gates. That is a safer space.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose if you push them further out, you've got that bigger circumference of where they can be dropped rather than them all coming to one point outside the school. So it does actually, it can sort of disrupt the people coming forward. Okay, I've got another question for this time for Katie, again from Abby. Do you think it's important to promote individual physical activity as well as group sports? She says that some children may think they don't enjoy exercise because it's in a group setting, whereas they may enjoy more solo activities, for example, yoga or running or cycling.
Absolutely, and I think we should provide opportunities for children to do a range of different sports and activities. So if it's running and yoga and those individualised things, then absolutely. And that's where Pupil Voice comes in, is finding out what your children want. And you may find that actually some children don't want, like you've said, some children don't want to be a part of a competitive activity, and that's fine. We know that lots of children don't. So we do provide a running club, we do provide yoga, we do provide dance, and things that they can do, and skipping, and things that they can do where it's a personal thing, and it doesn't always have to be about a challenge or competition. And sometimes it is taking that away, but I think really understanding what your pupils want and speaking to individual pupils as well is important, because otherwise you don't know what you need to provide for them. So those discussions are key.
Okay, thank you. And you did say that about surveying pupils to ask what they were interested in. So yeah. Okay, we've had lots of comments about the active travel. I guess it's quite a sort of interesting area for a lot of people. As a governor, I would support the enabling of children walking, etc. to school. It's getting the parents to agree to that would potentially be the challenge, I think. And yeah, I can definitely relate to that. But people looking to discuss it at their next governor's meeting, so that's great to hear. We have got a question about how the schemes could be inclusive for disabled children or parents for that matter. So any comments on that, Chris?
Is that for the drop-off?
Yes, the drop-off, yeah, active travel.
Yeah, look, clearly, if you've got parents you've got families who absolutely need to use a car, then there are ways of accommodating that. I know there's another school, not ours, but around the corner, where there's a child who definitely needs dropping off outside the school. And I mean, local residents on the street, you will see cars on the street. There's not a total ban on traffic. It's just that those cars feel like guests, and they drive at about 5 miles an hour. And there is like a dramatic change. So you will occasionally see a car up there, it's a local resident, or it's somebody who has to do a drop-off, but they are driving at walking pace. I think that's the. And then I would also say for a lot of children, if you're using the interesting thing for us is we have children who do need to use a wheelchair, is that many parts of the country, frankly, pavements and curbs are not particularly friendly, and just creating that space outside the school where there is a bit more space to manoeuvre, again, makes a difference.
Okay, thank you. And a question for Alex. How are figures obtained for obesity, consuming 5 a day and daily physical activity time? I think for individual schools, and how can a school best monitor that?
Yeah, so in terms of the population figures for overweight and obesity, it's the National Child Measurement Programme. Again, there are some difficulties with taking data like that because of the amount of children or parents of children who don't want to include them in that. In terms of 5 a day recommendations, they're from something that's called the National Diet and Nutrition Survey. So that looks every few years at what people are eating. It takes a subsection of people and looks at what they're eating. There's some interesting sort of like short reports if you're interested sort of on a national level. I'm not personally sure about how best to monitor that within your own school. I'm sure that'll be something that people can bring up at their governors meeting or whatever, because understandably it can be quite intrusive to start measuring those kind of things. But I think just sort of promoting it and trying to encourage physical activity and encourage healthy eating is going to be really important.
There tends to be surveys and things, like national surveys that you can take part in that gathers that data for. We take part in like a my school, my house kind of survey, and it gathers data on percentages of children that and sort of what they eat and sort of intake and things like that. If parents are obviously willing to take part of those things, so those things can be really helpful to schools. But you never know; it's never 100%, is it? With that sort of data.
Excellent, thank you. We are pretty much at time. I just have one last question for you, Katie. Whether your school has any relationships or whether you encourage your students to join organisations like the Scouts or the Guides. I guess they're too young for Duke of Edinburgh, for example, in primary school, but Guides and Scouts and Cadets and that sort of side of things.
Yes, definitely, because those sorts of things children love as well. So we haven't made any links this year with sort of Guides and Scouts and things like that, but a lot of our children do attend those things, and we know that from the information that we collect from our pupils. So it is about us saying, actually, when we share links to clubs and things, and obviously safeguarding is really key here, you need to make sure that you're very clear about where you're sending your children, and for parents to check where they're going as well. That when you do have those links, that parents can attend and go to those things, that you can include sort of other sort of ways that children can keep active as well. So sort of Guides and Scouts and things. We don't do Duke of Edinburgh. That's usually our secondary.
Yeah.
Do that.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, it's all keeping active, isn't it? Okay, thank you ever so much to our panelists. Really do appreciate it. It's a really fascinating presentation today. I've taken lots of notes myself that I'm going to go away with. I hope that everybody listening enjoyed it as much as I did. We've just announced that we're running a conference in September at Governors for Schools. It will be an online conference, so lots more content like this coming soon, and we do hope that you'll be joining us for the events that we're having in September. So thanks ever so much. We have loads more questions in the chat, but unfortunately have run out of time. So thank you all for joining us, and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.